Hello and welcome to Book Lovers Companion, the podcast about books, authors, their craft and more. Joining me today for this episode from across the pond, from the windy city of Chicago, is crime fiction and historic fiction author Libby Fisher Hellman. Hello Libby and welcome to Book Lovers Companion.
Hi Edith, it's lovely to be here.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you on, and thanks again for being so accommodating since we had to change dates. Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, I was the reason you had to change the date, not you, but thank you. Thank you.
My absolute pleasure. So we are here to talk about your most recent book. Is it Max's War, which came out in 2024?
Correct.
Mm-hmm. And it's part of your saga series, so books about historic events or historic times which are important, like the Second World War or the Vietnam War. But this one is a bit close to home, a bit closer to home since
Yes. I guess it would be. Yeah, it is. My saga series are my historical novels, and I like fairly recent times because there's closer and there's more, I think, identity. At least I'd feel more identity. And so going back to World War II is about the farthest I've gone. And it's not my first foray. I have another book, which is a series of 3 novellas that take place during the war, but that is the war in the States. And so this time I really had to bone up on the war itself. And it was shocking how much I did not know about World War II. I really didn't. So before I even wrote a word of Max's War, I did about 3 or 4 months of research. And it was only when events and people started to repeat themselves that I, from all the different sources that I looked at, that I said, okay, I remember this and this fits with that. And and I said, okay, maybe I am ready to write this. So I did.
Okay. And for our listeners, can you tell us a little bit about your book, about Max's War?
Yeah, certainly. The subtitle is the story of a Ritchie boy. And the Ritchie Boys were a group of, well, they got their name after the fact, but they were a group of maybe a couple thousand, predominantly Jewish, German, and Austrian refugees who made it out of Hitler's territory to the United States by hook or by crook. Either they came with their parents or they came by themselves. In some cases, they had been there or their parents had come earlier, like right after World War I. But they were drafted, or in some cases they enlisted, and they were sent to a secret camp in northern Maryland called Camp Ritchie, hence the name, where they were trained in counterintelligence and interrogation techniques. And then they were shipped back across the sea and went to the front lines where they actually interrogated German POWs, and then also did counterintelligence when they could. Well, part of their interrogation was counterintelligence because they were finding out all about the troop movements and the morale and the size and where they were headed. And it is said that the Ritchie Boys were responsible for 60% of the land troops movement from 1942 on. So that's not a small number. So they did a good job.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have to admit, I had to look it up myself because I didn't know about it that much either.
Hardly any Americans know about the Ritchie Boys either. I was with the Richie Boy Museum. It has now
Okay.
is now in existence, and it is actually on the grounds of the Camp Ritchie
Mm.
in Maryland, which, by the way, was only about 7 or 8 miles from Franklin Roosevelt's
Mm.
summer home,
Mm.
which was called Shangri-La. Uh, and do you know what it's called now?
No
Camp
idea.
David.
Ah.
It's called Camp David. So the idea was not to have the camp too far from Washington,
Mhm.
D.C., because the Army, which are the organization under which it was founded, wanted close contact with
Mm.
them. It's amazing how they set up their program, but that's a whole nother story from
Mm.
the one I want to talk to you about now. But anyway, the book is in 2 parts. Well, it's actually in several parts, but the first part starts in 1933, 32, and 33. And I really wanted to go into the laws that were passed by Germany, by Hitler and his people, for a couple of reasons. Number one, I know that most Americans do not know. I mean, everyone knows about the Holocaust, okay? And everyone knows it was horrible and 6 million Jews were killed and da 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 da. But what led up to it? How could a society that has been so sophisticated become led by a dictator? And how did it happen that the German people allowed that to happen? Well, we're sort of getting a taste of that right now in the States. So maybe people aren't quite as uh, unknowing as they were back then, but I don't know. And even more important than us, our children have no idea. I mean, you talk about the rise of anti Semitism in America, and a lot of it is born out of, you know, Holocaust deniers and what happened. And they just don't know what happened. The laws, between 1933, 32, 33, and well, we'll end it at Kristallnacht, in 1938, just because that's a good place to end it. Um, but people don't know, and children don't know, and they have to know, and the whole world has to know so that it won't happen again. So, in my very little way, I wanted to sort of lay out some of the laws and how it affected a young person who was young himself at the time, because he was a young teenager when these laws happened, and his family did go to Holland. They escaped and they went to Holland, and they were in Holland, for Amsterdam, for about 3 years. This is all fictional, by the way. And those were the normal years of his life until Germany invaded the the Dutch, and then it became sort of just an ally of Germany. And he got out. He had a sponsor in the US, who would not accept his parents. So he gets out. He comes to America. His parents go to Sobibor, and they don't come out. And once he's in America, um, he enlists because he's so angry at what happened, and he's picked to become a Ritchie Boy. So once he's in America after a year or two, we start focusing on what he does at the camp, and then what he does um, in the war itself. And it starts basically D-Day. He's in he gets there a little bit before D-Day. He's in England for a while, and then he's in D-Day, and then he's there at the Battle of the Bulge, and then he's originally from Regensburg, and he goes back to Regensburg, which I discovered after I picked Regensburg, had the largest German refugee camp in the country, in Germany, was in Regensburg. Who knew? And the whole reason I chose Regensburg is that this is basically what I just told you is a very rough um, account of what happened to my late father-in-law.
Mm.
He was born in
Mhm.
Regensburg. They went to Holland. His parents
Mhm.
didn't get out. He got to America. He was not a Ritchie boy. He was drafted into speaking to the CIA, the
Okay.
OSS,
Okay.
and he was doing exactly the same thing that my character
Mm.
in the book does. He was
Okay.
interrogating German POWs and doing some counterintelligence when I needed to. So
Mm.
that
Yeah.
that's pretty much what the book is about. I
Yeah.
loved writing it. Once I knew what I was doing, and I knew the history and the continuity and what it just almost wrote itself.
Yeah. I can imagine that. And people who write historical fiction, they often are absolute lovers of research. Does that also apply to you?
Absolutely. I can get lost in research. And in fact, I get a lot of ideas
Mm.
for plot from
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
research. I'm trying to think if there were any. Oh, yeah, yeah. The whole scenes in the Battle of the Bulge. Well,
Mhm.
y- it occurred to me, and you don't hear this in the States. Maybe you hear it in Germany that the Allies won the Battle of the Bulge by sheer luck, and it was the luck of the weather. And the first week of the Battle of the Bulge, the Allies were in deep trouble because the skies were horrible. It was just about this time of year. It was in December.
Okay.
And the weather had turned bad,
Yeah.
and the US allies could not send in any air support.
Hmm.
So the soldiers on the ground were getting pummeled because Hitler took everybody, anybody who had two legs and was a man, was
Mm.
cons- conscripted and ended up because he knew this was the end of the line. If they didn't
Mm.
win this battle, that things were going to get pretty bad. And they were doing quite well. So
Yeah.
I did have, but and the Ritchie boys theoretically should have been telling and sending up the grapevine
Mhm.
the messages that the
Yeah.
Germans had many more troops and were doing, were incredibly aggressive, much more than Eisenhower or any of the or Montgomery uh, had thought. But that
Mhm.
message didn't really get there until almost like the 4th day or something like that, and when Patton left wherever he was
Yeah.
in Western Europe and came roaring across to save the Americans, and then the weather cleared.
Mhm.
And as soon as the weather cleared, um, the tide changed. But so I had a couple of scenes where, my Ritchie boy, where Max actually goes
Yeah.
to one of the he goes up into the hills, and he's looking down at the main crossing road, and he sees Panzer after Panzer after Panzer coming
Mm.
through the mountains, and he's like, "Whoa, what is this? These people are the men are there's
Yeah.
no end to it,"
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
he's appalled. Yeah, so
Yeah.
that was one scene. The scene where he's in his last um, to graduate from the Ritchie boys is they took the um, they took the boys and they weren't boys, they were men. There were even middle-aged men who were
Mm.
part of the Ritchie boys, but they took them 20 miles away from camp and dropped them off at night and said, "Okay, here's a compass. Make your way back to camp by 8 o'clock in the morning, or you fail."
Mhm.
And
Yep.
so I had to make up an entire uh, test for him, and that. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
Yeah, that was interesting because the one he was paired with, his partner in this exercise, it was interesting because he said, okay, he spoke perfect German, but he grew up in the United States. And I mean, sorry for any spoilers, but it's more than that. It needs more than just speaking the language perfectly and fluently and without an American accent. It's about also, like Max, I think he reflects on it. It's about the culture. It's about the way people think about
Absolutely.
what they know and what they know about the fellow countrymen, how they think, how they feel, and so on. It takes more than just language to get it right in the end if they
Absolutely.
drop you in Germany or in Austria.
Right. Well, that particular fellow was his nemesis
Yeah.
because he had already been assimilated into the US culture with that sense of entitlement, that he had,
Yeah.
that many Americans, seem to have.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was an interesting scene for me to write. I enjoyed writing that.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I also found it interesting, you mentioned it at the beginning when you spoke about the plot of Max's War. You didn't start I mean, you have the scene at the beginning where he enters, the office and he's told, he will be sent to the camp where he will learn all about counterintelligence and so on. Uh, but then you have a change and you start, like you said before, with 1932, 1933, and what it was like.
Mhm.
The the whole atmosphere in Germany. Not so much at this time in Austria, because Austria was still not part of Nazi
Correct.
Germany.
Right. Correct.
But people in Austria got a feeling because the one you mentioned, Arthur says Inquart, he was a politician later in the Netherlands, and he was responsible for the deportation of the Jews of the Netherlands. But he was an Austrian. He was a lawyer and he was a politician, and he played a major role in the Nazi takeover of Austria in 1938. So, I mean, the Nazis were already active in Austria at the time, uh, but it was still not the same as it was in Germany at the time.
Yeah.
So this whole
Yeah.
atmosphere they experience, and what is astonishing and what you wrote so perfectly about in your book is this attitude Max's father has, understandably so, because it was his country. He grew up there. He fought for this country in the First World War, and so on. And then it's if he hadn't done any of that.
None of the Jews thought that
Yeah.
anyone in Germany. I mean, Germany was an assimilated country as far as the Jews were concerned.
Mm. Yeah.
Before Hitler came to power,
Mm.
it just no one would have thought it.
Yeah.
No one. I mean, yes, there were the National Socialists, but they were a fringe party for a while, for a
Yeah.
long time until Hitler came to power. And one thing that did I had not known is how much the people of Germany adored Hitler for the first 4 or 5 years. I mean, he was their god,
Yes.
and, he brought them out of that horrible depression,
Yeah.
economy, the economic problems. He, was, Germany first and the rest of the world later, um, and people responded to that, and it was, amazing, amazing.
Yeah, it's astonishing. And you said before that it was the most astonishing part is the fact that a sophisticated society like the German society at the time. I was wondering while you said that, is it because maybe we are too obedient?
That could be, and also the need for order and organization, is very Germanic, and
Yes.
Hitler definitely
Yes.
imposed that.
Yes.
And it could be the obedience and the organization, and the pride
Yeah.
in, we are first, we are best, we are the leaders of Europe, so they
Mm.
thought.
Yeah, yes, yes, absolutely. And the First World War also played a major part, and the Treaty of Versailles, or the Peace Treaty of Versailles, also played a major part. And like you just said, it
That's
was a
true.
question of national pride, I suppose, and
Yeah.
you perfectly played their feelings.
Mhm. I remember, my husband, um, who was this, both my in-laws came over, one in 38 and one in
Hmm.
39. So they were right off the boat. And when we were talking about the German pride, my husband used to call the French froggies,
Okay.
and that was because his father called them froggies.
Yeah,
So I rest my case.
yeah, this age-old rivalry between France and Germany. Yeah, yeah, because there is this famous picture of reconciliation between France and Germany when they commemorated the end of the war with Helmut Kohl and who was the French president at that time. Can't it eludes me at the moment, but where they hold hands, they put down, you know, flowers and they held hands and strange for men, but they did it. It was a sign of, yeah, we are friends again. The project
Mhm,
of the EU and so on. We work together to move on and to make Europe stronger, better.
mhm,
So,
mm. Yeah.
but maybe there was still some resentment, sort of. Maybe there are, because it's a bit like Germany and Austria, this resentment between, yeah, especially
Yes.
from
Yeah.
especially from the Austrians.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, well, I can imagine,
Yeah,
especially
yeah.
since my ancestors were Austrian, apparently, some of mine.
Yes, which means you are on my side then.
Yeah. Well, no, the other family was from Regensburg, so I'm both. Anyway,
Yeah,
my
but
kids are both.
that's Bavaria. That doesn't
Yeah,
count. That
that's
doesn't count. That
that's
doesn't
yeah,
count as just Germany.
right.
It absolutely doesn't.
Got it, got it. Anyway,
Um, you said you researched for this book for about 3 to 4 months. And
yeah.
reading it, I got the impression you dove not only deeply into the social structure of this time of Nazi Germany and what it entailed, like you said, the laws and so on against the Jewish um, part of the population. But also, I got the impression into military history.
What? I'm sorry.
Military history.
Oh, yes. Well, I had to. I mean, I've spent my whole education trying to ignore military history.
Yeah.
So, and in fact, one of the reasons that I was very hesitant to take on this story was because I knew I was going to have to
Mm,
investigate and
mm,
research and understand the big battles.
mm,
And I
mm.
and I really only chose the battles in the European theater. I didn't do
Yeah.
anything in the Asian theater,
Mhm. Yeah.
or any place else, and I really only did the battles that America was
Mm.
involved in, although I did do some research in Market Garden, which happened before
Mhm.
the Market Garden,
Mhm.
battle
Mhm.
for, and a little bit on Norwegian,
Mhm.
the heavy heavy water
Mhm.
and, Heisenberg, what he was doing.
Mm. But you
So that
also
wasn't military, atom
uh, mm,
researching the atom bomb.
yeah. And could you rely in writing the book on research you did before on Asia, because Shanghai also is
Yeah.
subplot, so to speak, in your book?
Yes. 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 Shanghai was, I've been fascinated by the story of the Jewish people in Shanghai. And my in-laws had cousins that spent the war in Shanghai, and it was not a perfect place. It was tough, and they were relegated to a ghetto at one point. And one of, but they weren't killed. And there was cholera, and there were other diseases, and they were smashed together, and no one had room. It was very crowded. It was very dirty. But they made a life for themselves. They had schools. They had theater. They had games for the children. They tried to find jobs for the men. And they had a synagogue, which is still around today. And so they made a life for themselves. And the fact was that when the doors to the Jews were closed in all of Europe, the only place that would take them was Shanghai, and that was just kind of by accident also, because there weren't the number of customs officials in Shanghai to keep them out.
Okay. You also said before that in the United States, people know about the Holocaust. Of course, they know about America's involvement in the Pacific, of course, after Pearl Harbor. Of course, they know that the Americans fought in Europe as well, but the whole how it came to be is a bit underrepresented. Let's put it that way. And you said there was an interesting phrase, "Make Germany great again." Where have we heard it recently? Anyway, steps to that, how it went, and how he made it to where he was, because there was this underestimation of him and his movement by the Conservative Party, and they thought they could have him under control, they could control him, and we all know how that worked out. Not so
Right.
well in the end, because they really, really underestimated him and the people behind him. And there were lots of very, very rich people who supported Hitler, who paid for him personally, who were the patrons of his private life, of the patrons of the party. So I think these are the people in the back. They need to be
We call them
closer looked
oligarchs
at.
today.
Yes, like today, like in
It's
this day and
exactly like
age.
today. And you've heard, I'm sure, that Trump had one book on his bedside table, and it was Hitler's book, Mein
Dear.
Kampf, and he
Oh
read the
dear.
whole thing.
Oh dear.
Probably the only book he's ever read of the whole in his life, all the way through.
Probably.
But what he's done has been so similar.
It's a bit frightening from our perspective here when we look and what is happening, what is going on, and what people say, especially your politicians at the moment. And you think, oh dear, where have I heard this before? It reminds me of other speeches we have heard, and other things people said, and other attitudes we know about from the
Well, you would
past.
know. The Germans and the Austrians would know better than any other people on earth how frightening
I
it
don't
really
know.
is.
I don't know if they do, because people like to forget.
They like to forget, well, which is why I wrote about those
Yeah,
laws,
yeah.
and getting up to Nuremberg, and then Hitler was really, he had a plan, and pretty much what I took from it was pretty much everything that he was going to do, he said he was going to do in the early years in
Yeah,
1933.
yeah.
But I don't think that it was I don't think either the people believed that it was going to happen, or it just the society wasn't organized enough to actually implement what he wanted. It became
Mm.
organized over the
Yeah,
next 2 or 3 years, and then
yeah,
you got to the Nuremberg laws,
yeah.
and then
I think they didn't take him seriously. Like, they didn't take your current
mhm,
president seriously. I mean,
yeah.
nobody did.
No,
And
no, it's exactly the same thing.
and everything he said, he did. And you should listen to what
Yeah.
he said, just like in the past,
Well,
or you should have
the good
read the book.
the good thing is that I don't think it's gonna happen here because there's a lot of resistance now, and he's fallen apart, so well, that's a whole 'nother story. Um, Hitler was incredibly lucky to have Goebbels
Mm. Yeah,
because Goebbels was the master of propaganda,
yeah.
and I don't know if he created it or he
No,
borrowed
no,
it from
he
other.
borrowed it from others. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but that had he not been such a master of it, I don't know if he could have pulled it off. I mean, Trump thinks
Mhm.
he is, but he's not, and
Yeah.
that's why we have a lot more resistance now
Mm.
because we're the propaganda that he's trying to have us believe is so far-fetched, and so was Goebbels, but it worked back then. It
Yeah.
worked. We weren't as cynical, or people weren't as cynical. People wanted to believe it.
Yes. Yes, and he had a way with words. I mean, let's be honest here. He was he had a PhD in German, so Goebbels, so
Yeah,
he knew what he did,
yeah.
absolutely, and others also knew what they did. I mean, people from the newspapers and so on. For example, the Stürmer, their newspaper, they knew what they did,
Mhm.
and they used the media. They played the media. I mean, it was they did it perfectly. I mean, every household had a radio. Radio was the medium back then
It
to
was
get.
new. It was the
Yes,
TV. It
yes,
was,
yes,
the internet of today,
yes,
of yesterday,
absolutely.
I'm sorry.
Yes, and I mean, when you think of Leni Riefenstahl and her films she made about the Nazis. I mean,
Yeah.
genius,
Yeah.
even today.
Yes.
They knew how to
Yes.
do it, absolutely. And I mean, Hitler was one of the first politicians who flew to his speeches when he was fighting to get elected. Also, completely new. Nobody did it before him, and
I didn't.
a
Yeah.
stroke of genius. I mean, what can you say about that? I mean, it's incredible.
So he had a lot of help, and,
Yeah,
for a while, he had, good generals too.
yeah, yeah. That's one of the one of
Goring
the
was
yeah.
yeah,
One of the major parts, I
anyway.
think, why he was so successful in the beginning.
Mhm.
I mean,
Blitzkrieg.
yeah, Blitzkrieg wouldn't have happened without his generals. It wasn't
Yeah,
him. Yeah, it wasn't him.
yep.
I mean,
It was a new
let's
kind of war. It was
yeah,
clearly, I mean, the differences between the way the war was fought in World War One and World War Two
yeah,
are epic.
yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, World War One was the beginning, was the blueprint, because that's when the new technology was invented, and it went from there. So
mhm,
yeah, yeah,
mhm.
absolutely. And I said when we started at the beginning about the Ritchie Boys, I looked it up and it was interesting because there was an article online and it came out in May this year about the Ritchie Boys, the Austrian Ritchie Boys.
Oh,
And
really?
yeah, yeah. Uh 80 years, or it was because 80 years of the Second Republic, Austrian Republic, and they did an article on the Austrian Broadcasting Network about those because two books were written back in 2020 about the Ritchie Boys and the Austrian parts in this major undertaking. And this article also mentions two very famous members of the Ritchie Boys, who later became a very famous comedian here in Austria. Georg Kreisler, very famous one. Everybody knows, well, not the younger generation, but my generation still knows about him.
Well,
And Marcel Bravi, you might know him because he was Leonard Bernstein's secretary for
oh,
quite a
really?
time. And later
I
on,
didn't know that.
he was very often on TV when he talked about opera. And those were the two
Didn't know.
two most famous members.
Yeah,
And in the
yeah.
article, it says there were about 500 Austrians who were part of the Ritchie Boys.
Yeah, the numbers are a little fluid because nobody
Yeah.
really had because it was a very rigorous program, and if there was a class of 30 men, at the end of the training, there would only be 8 or 9 left. So nobody really had a good take on that.
Yeah, it's a little bit like the SOE, isn't it? The British were first to develop
Yes.
those techniques.
The Americans got the idea from the British, because at the time, the American intelligence community was fractured, kind of like it is today, with like all these different things. But when they realized that war was imminent, or that it probably was going to happen in the next few years, they wanted a way to centralize the intelligence operations. And Camp Ritchie was a way to do that. And so there was almost 2 levels of education going on at Camp Ritchie. There was the recruits who were there for extensive training in what we already talked about, but there were also what they called like a graduate program, where people from other intelligence agencies would come in and take a particular class, like, surveillance, or counterintelligence, or aerial photography, or radio. So it was an interesting curriculum that they had there, because they adapted to whatever was needed. They weren't at all stringent. They just would add a class, drop a class, whatever was needed for the war effort.
Yeah. I mean, you said it was important for you to write this book, and this book also exists in a German translation for those who prefer to read in German, unlike me. Did you get any
Yes, it is
feedback?
in German.
Yeah. Did you get any feedback from German readers?
Yeah, pretty good feedback. I think you can check some of the reviews. I think they're on Amazon. I did have a very good translator for that one. Subsequent books that I've done, I haven't had such a good translator, so I am getting some pushback, and I'm taking them down and trying to redo them so that they meet the demands of your market. One book in particular is not doing so well, and I'm going to have to take a look at it for a third time. But I have a question. Are audiobooks gaining in popularity in Germany, or is it still a very fringe operation or
I
industry?
I can't really say, to be honest, but from what I gather when I look at Amazon or other websites, I think it's absolutely popular at the moment, because people like to listen to audiobooks when they are in their cars, or when they are on the trains going to work or going home from work. So I think it is gaining more popularity here as well.
Yeah. Because I've had a number of narrators email me and say, we really would like to do an audio version of Max's War, but I haven't done it yet. I don't know if I'm going to, because I don't want to. It's a major investment. So
Yeah.
I'd have
Yeah.
to know that I was gonna
Yeah. Yeah.
make money back, so we'll see.
Yeah, absolutely understandable. But I think it does because when you commute to work in your car, because a friend of mine, he usually has his books on on Audible or Spotify because that's the way he can read. Because
Yeah.
when does he
Yeah,
have the time to do so? And so he prefers it that
right.
way, for example.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
do the same thing with a lot of mysteries, I'll listen to them on audio. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Because I often talk about other authors about it and other people about it, and I say I can't do that. It's not for me. I tried it. I really tried, but I can't do that. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's I
I
don't know.
It's the difference between reading a book and watching TV. I
Mhm.
mean, you're it's a totally different medium.
Yeah.
The words are not as important as the action or the
Mm.
dialogue,
Mm.
and I'm kind of don't wanna give up the words
Yeah.
'cause I'm a word person.
Neither do I, and I can't. I'm afraid. No matter how good the narrators are, I can't listen to them. I'm sorry, I can't. It's just I need a conversation because what I do when I'm in my car and need to go by car to work uh, every day is I listen to podcasts, to conversations.
Mhm.
I prefer that because it is easier for me to concentrate on these
On
conversations
the
than
road.
on books. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah, no, I'm the same way. I'm the
yeah,
same way now. I used to
yeah.
listen to a lot more audio than I do now. So,
Mm, yeah.
kind of
Libby,
return to literature.
yeah, I love my books. I have my Kindle, but I also love my printed books. I have to say, I'm honest here.
Mhm.
Libby, may I ask you about your writing process because it's something other authors and our listeners are always interested in others, how other authors do it, their process. Maybe they can learn from you. How do you do it?
Sure. Well, I've changed. When I started, I uh, outlined everything, and this was even before I was published, and I wasn't published. And I hired an editor at one point, and she came back with like an 8-page single spaced pages, typewritten pages of everything that I could have done better. But her basic point was, you're not letting the story evolve. You're not letting your characters lead the story. You're trying to force them into pegs. You're trying to put a square peg into a round hole, and it's not working. And I got pretty angry, and I said, "What do you think? I'm a channel, or I'm supposed to be channeling?" She said, "Well, yeah, kind of." She said, and she gave me some exercises, and she said, "Put two people in a room and write a scene and see what happens." And of course, I did that, and I got what she was saying. And once I did that, I really stopped outlining at all. um, what I do now is I take notes. I certainly take a lot of notes with the history and the dates and the people and things like that, but I also take a lot of notes on possible scenes or chapters or um, something that I hope is going to work out. And I have a couple of files. I have a put in file and a takeout file. And it's mostly the put ins are the notes that I think, well, maybe I can do something with. Then the takeouts are something that I've written that's not working, that I know is not going to work. And I take it out thinking, well, I'll save it. You never know. I might use it. And of course, in the 19 books that I've written, I've never used anything from the takeout file. But anyway, um, I should probably just ditch them. But the way I write is that I start with a premise, I start with a couple of characters, and then I go as far as if you're on a road at night, I go as far as your headlights can see, which for me is about 3 or 4 chapters. I have to know where I came from, and I have to know what the next chapter is, but I don't have to know the end of the book. And in some cases, in many cases, the ending is not what I imagined it to be or not what I thought it would be at all. It changes dramatically. Max's War, it was the ending was what I expected it to be, but that's unusual for me.
Okay. Is it
Usually the
even
ending changes it. Go
okay?
ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. Is that even true for your crime fiction stories?
I'm sorry. I got to pick up
Yeah, yeah,
my
yeah,
other.
yeah, yeah,
Hold
yeah.
on one second. Okay, here it is. All right. All right. What did you say? I'm sorry.
Is it even true for your crime fiction stories?
Absolutely, even more so,
Interesting.
because you have to unmask the perpetrator at the
Yeah,
end of the
yeah,
book.
yeah.
And many in A Bitter Veil, by the way, which was my first German translation, bitterer Schleier. I don't
Yeah,
know how to
yeah,
pronounce
yeah,
it.
yeah.
And anyway, um, I started. Okay, this is the villain, and I started writing him, and I liked him. I said, "Wait, he's too good to be the villain." Okay, so she's going to be the villain, and I started writing her, and she ended up being a very nice person too. And I literally everybody I wrote, I liked them, and I couldn't make them the person that committed a murder. So I got to the end of the book, and I called up a good friend of mine who's also an author, and I said, "I'm at the end of the book. I don't know what I'm going to do. I can't figure out who did it." And she said, "Calm down, calm down." And this were in the days when I was still drinking wine, so she said, "Have a glass of wine, and we'll go through it." And we literally went through all my cast of characters, and I was talking about their motivations and why I
Mhm.
liked them and why they couldn't, and we finally figured out who did it. It was almost by process of elimination, and that's who
Okay.
became the perpetrator. So if you ever read Bitterer Schleier, you'll know that that was the product of liking all my characters to the point where I didn't know who I was going to pick as the villain.
Okay. Interesting. It's
Yeah, and
fascinating.
I mean, the point is that if I'm surprised by the
Mm,
turn of events in a story, I imagine that my
mm.
readers will be too. And
Good
I like
point.
it when I'm surprised. I like it when I'm surprised because it changes everything
Yeah,
and
absolutely true.
keeps a book yeah.
Yeah, I agree, especially if you can pull it off. And if you
Mhm.
don't, and if they don't put, oh, this is a book with a lot of twists. Oh yes, really? If they put that on the cover, okay. Now spoilers, because
Mhm.
now we know what's going to happen. It's fascinating because I have heard authors talk about their process, and they said, "Oh, I have this huge spreadsheet. I put everything down, and then I only have to sit down and write it up. Each and every
Well,
little detail is already there."
no, I can't do it that way. I'm exactly the opposite. I don't have any spreadsheets or any outline. But I tell you, there's a very successful American author, Jeffrey Deaver, which many,
Mhm.
I'm sure, I know his books are
Yeah,
translated
yeah.
into German.
Yeah,
And he is that way. He says he spends 8 months on an outline with every detail and everything that happens. And then he spends 4 months writing the outline. And I don't know how he does that. I can't
yeah,
do that.
yeah. He's also the author who writes for the market because he was at a crime fiction event, which I also attended in Bristol,
Oh,
and
Bristol, sure.
yeah, yeah, and he was there because he was one of the supporters of this event right from the start, and there was this,
Mhm.
10 years or so. And he said he writes for the market. He researches the market and then he writes for the market, which I find astonishing because I often wonder, how does he do that? And lots of
Mhm.
authors say, I would never do that because I need to write what I like, what I would like to read, and not just for the market.
Well, to each his own. I mean, Jeffrey Deaver is very successful
Yeah.
at doing that. He's made his living doing that. So I guess if you want, if that is your priority, that's what you do.
Yeah.
I love the genre. I
Mm.
love both the crime
Mm.
fiction genre and the historical genre.
Mm.
So I do it for the love, and I love the historical genre I even love that maybe a little bit more than crime fiction, but it's such a project.
Mm.
The research I have to, it's
Mm.
like taking a course,
Yeah.
and I need to, it's going to take me months of research to even get up to speed to write it. So
Mm.
that's why I write more crime fiction,
Understand.
contemporary.
Yeah, understandable. And is there any specific era in history which you would love to write but haven't dared yet?
McCarthy, the
Mm.
McCarthy era in America.
Okay.
And I'm trying to think. Well, I loved um, A Gentleman in Moscow.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have? And I loved the contrast between the last of the royals in Russia
Mm-hmm.
and then the communist takeover,
Mm-hmm.
the revolution,
Mm-hmm.
and that just I would love to do that, but that's another 6 months of research.
At least, or maybe even a year, because Hilary Mantel, before she started writing her books, gave herself time for about a year to research for her
That's
books.
right.
So
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I also loved the idea of King Arthur and his knights. So,
ah,
but that's been done. That's been done. So I don't think I
mm,
can add anything.
uh,
We'll see. I don't think so.
well, some new perspective. Who knows? Why not?
I don't know. Ken Follett has that covered. kind of. Kind of.
But yeah, but there are never enough books. If you love a certain era, why not? Because why not? A different point of view?
Yeah. He's
Why not?
actually one of the authors that I hold in very high esteem because
Mm,
he does both historicals and
yeah,
contemporary,
yeah,
and
yeah,
I love that.
yeah. And his books are about this.
He doesn't spare a word. He doesn't
No,
spare one word.
absolutely not. uh, Libby, may I ask you, do you have any advice for any other author out there?
Well, that would be personal advice, and that is it's definitely very hard to get published traditionally these days. Um, eh, you either have to write to market or you have to be an incredible writer to begin with, neither of which I had. So, and you really need to, I mean, everyone thinks that they have a book in them, but everyone doesn't really. If you don't know proper grammar and you don't know how to write a cogent paragraph, you better learn before you try to write a book because it's to those of us who know grammar, know how a book should sound, it's pretty obvious when someone isn't up to snuff. But so I would all those things. Having been there, if you have to write, if you've got that, and I didn't really. Well, I had to tell a story. That's different. I told it in different mediums before I settled onto words. But if you have to write, then keep at it, and don't get too enamored of your first book because most first books aren't published. It was my fourth book that got published first, so uh, don't think that your first book is the be all and the end all. Keep going. You'll become a better writer. And maybe it'll take you 6 books. Maybe it'll take you 10 books. But keep at it.
Hmm. So that brings me to my next question. you are keeping at it. So what's next from you?
I'm writing a contemporary thriller about two
Ooh.
women on the run from a mysterious cyber villain.
Ah,
Yeah.
Sam Altman, Elon Musk. No,
Uh,
forget it. I'm just silly. Forget
it
it.
would be. You know what? It does involve AI.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I've just been boning up on AI.
Mm,
So, but I'm already about 80 pages into it. So we'll see.
mm.
I'd
Well,
like to finish it, but there's so much still that I don't know that it's
okay.
slow going right now.
Yeah, but it sounds intriguing. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, then maybe I'll go to the McCarthy era. And who knows? A lot of people said they wanted to see more of Max, and Max would and actually Renee uh,
Mm-hmm.
would very much be in America and in uh, alive and kicking during the McCarthy era. So who knows? Maybe.
That would have been another question of mine. Will there be a sequel?
I'm leaving it open. I mean, I've finished the story's done. It would be a very different story.
Yeah,
But who
yeah.
knows?
Who knows? Both of them working together. Cold War.
Well, I don't know if
Maybe.
I mean, he would definitely be a lawyer. I know he would be a lawyer,
Okay.
and she might be some sort of activist. I know because she was always the one that was sort of pushing him at the beginning.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
when they were kids,
Yeah.
she was the one that. So we'll see.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, anyway, your readers are looking forward to know more from you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Is there anything else, Libby, you would like our listeners to know?
Oh boy, what an open-ended question. I better say no because we could be here all night.
Splendid. Anyway, thank you for joining me. Thank you for making time for me.
Thank you. I'm delighted to have been here. And there is that. We're gonna have to cut that out. Can you hear the phone ringing?
Not
My
really.
phone is
Not.
ringing.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
No, don't worry. Don't
Okay.
worry. It's not that because the magic,
Okay.
the software will work its magic. Don't worry about it. Otherwise, Libby,
Okay.
thank you again. And please don't go away. Wait in the green room for me, and I will be with you shortly.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you, Edith, for putting this together. It was a delight.
Absolute pleasure. Here as well. Dear listeners, I do hope you enjoyed this episode as much as my guest and I did. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. And I do hope you will tune in for another episode. Until next time.